On the morning of June 4, 1942, while the Battle of Midway raged thousands of miles to the south, a parallel story unfolded in the fog-shrouded volcanic islands of the Aleutians that would prove equally decisive in the Pacific War. What began as a routine Japanese air raid would end with a fatal mistake that delivered to the United States the most closely guarded secret of the Japanese Empire: the legendary Zero fighter. 19-year-old Petty Officer First Class Tadayoshi Koga awoke that morning aboard the Japanese aircraft carrier Ryujo, preparing for another mission against American installations in the Aleutian Islands. Born on September 10, 1922, Koga was a promising young pilot who had earned his wings flying what many considered the most sophisticated combat aircraft in the world. His Zero, construction number 4593, had rolled off the Mitsubishi assembly line in Nagoya just 3.5 months earlier on February 19, 1942. The light grey paint still gleamed and every system functioned perfectly. The Mitsubishi A6M2 Model 21-0 was not merely a fighter aircraft, but a living legend. Since entering combat over China in 1940, the Zero had dominated the skies with a lethal combination of capabilities that no other fighter could match. It could remain airborne for more than 6 hours, allowing it to escort bombers on long-range missions impossible for any American fighter. Its rate of climb was frightening, reaching 20,000 feet faster than an American F-4F Wildcat could achieve 15,000. In close combat, the Zero could turn inside the radius of any Allied fighter, its lightweight construction and ingenious design allowing maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. When 78 Zeros participated in the Pearl Harbor attack on December 7, 1941, they had achieved a devastating kill ratio of 12-1 against their opponents. American pilots who survived encounters with the Zero returned with tales that seemed almost mythical. The aircraft appeared invincible, capable of outmaneuvering, outclimbing, and outlasting anything the Allies could field. By early 1942, the Zero had become the symbol of Japanese air superiority across the Pacific, from the Philippines to Malaya, from the Dutch East Indies to Burma. The Japanese attack on Dutch Harbor in the Aleutians was conceived as a diversionary operation in conjunction with the larger Midway offensive. American codebreakers had intercepted Japanese communications and knew the attack was coming, preparing Dutch Harbor's defenses accordingly. On June 3rd, Japanese forces launched their assault, and Koga was among the Zero pilots assigned to provide fighter cover and conduct strafing runs against American positions. During the engagement on June 4th, Koga and 2 wingmen attacked Dutch Harbor, strafing ground targets and downing a U.S. Navy PBY-5A Catalina flying boat, piloted by Lieutenant Bud Mitchell. The Americans, however, had established formidable anti-aircraft defenses around the installation. During his strafing run, Koga's Zero was struck by ground fire. The damage appeared minor at first, just a few holes in the fuselage, but one bullet had severed the oil return line. As Koga pulled up from his attack run, he noticed oil streaming from his aircraft, leaving a visible trail in the air behind him. An experienced pilot knows that an engine without oil is an engine with minutes to live. The lubricant that keeps metal from grinding against metal at thousands of revolutions per minute was now spraying into the slipstream instead of circulating through the engine. Koga faced a critical decision. He could attempt to return to the Ryujo, knowing his engine would likely seize before he reached the carrier, sending him into the frigid waters of the Bering Sea where survival time could be measured in minutes. Or he could look for an emergency landing site nearby. Koga chose the latter option. Approximately 25 miles east of Dutch Harbor lay Akutan Island, an uninhabited volcanic outcrop covered in tundra and marsh grass. From the air, the island's coastal meadows appeared flat and firm, potentially suitable for an emergency landing. Koga throttled back his engine, trying to reduce friction and heat, extending his glide time as he approached the island. His wingmen circled above, watching as their comrade descended toward what looked like solid ground. What Koga could not see from altitude was that the seemingly solid meadow was actually a waterlogged muskeg, a type of boggy wetland common in the Aleutians. As his Zero touched down wheels first on what appeared to be grass, the landing gear immediately sank into the soft ground. The sudden deceleration flipped the aircraft forward onto its back in a violent somersault. Koga, strapped into his seat, died instantly from a broken neck, killed not by enemy fire but by an accident of geography. His wingmen circled overhead, witnessing the crash. They could see the Zero lying inverted in the marsh, but had no way to determine Koga's fate or mount a rescue in hostile territory. Reluctantly, they returned to report the loss, believing that the soggy terrain and remote location would prevent the Americans from recovering the aircraft. The harsh Aleutian environment would surely destroy any useful intelligence value before the enemy could retrieve it. For exactly 1 month, the Zero lay undiscovered in its marsh grave. The island of Akutan was uninhabited, and the crash site was not visible from the limited sea lanes nearby. The aircraft settled deeper into the muskeg with each passing day, slowly being reclaimed by the bog that had killed its pilot. Rain and wind battered the airframe, but the Zero's robust construction held up remarkably well. The cold Aleutian climate actually worked in favor of preservation, slowing corrosion and decay. On July 10, 1942, an American PBY Catalina flying boat, piloted by Lieutenant William Thies, was conducting a routine patrol over the Aleutian chain. As Thies flew over Akutan Island, something unusual caught his eye, a shape that did not belong in the natural landscape. Banking his Catalina for a closer look, Thies spotted what appeared to be an aircraft lying upside down in a coastal meadow. The distinctive silhouette was unmistakable, a Japanese Zero fighter. Thies immediately radioed his discovery to Dutch Harbor. The intelligence value of an intact Zero could not be overstated. American pilots had been dying in combat against these fighters for 7 months, and despite numerous encounters, many of the Zero's capabilities remained mysterious. Wrecked Zeros had been recovered from Pearl Harbor, but they were too damaged to fly. This aircraft, if it could be salvaged, might be the first flyable Zero to fall into American hands. The Navy assembled a salvage team, but retrieving the Zero from Akutan presented enormous logistical challenges. The island had no airstrip, no harbor, and was located in one of the most inhospitable regions on Earth. The salvage operation would require careful planning and considerable resources. 2 previous salvage attempts had been dispatched, but failed to locate the exact crash site or lacked proper equipment. Finally, on July 15th, a 3rd salvage team arrived with proper equipment, a barge, tractors, and rigging. The team first had to recover Koga's body from the cockpit. Despite being trapped upside down for more than a month in the Aleutian elements, the pilot's body was relatively well preserved by the cold climate. The Americans buried Koga with military honors on a nearby hill, respecting their enemy, even as they prepared to exploit his aircraft. The recovery operation proved arduous. The Zero had to be carefully extracted from the bog, flipped upright, and loaded onto the barge without causing additional damage. The landing gear had been destroyed in the crash, and the propeller was bent, but the airframe itself was remarkably intact. The wings, engine, guns, instrumentation, and most critically, the flight control systems remained undamaged. After securing the Zero to the barge, the salvage team transported it to Dutch Harbor, then shipped it to Naval Air Station Seattle for initial assessment. At NAS Seattle, Navy technicians made a stunning discovery. Despite its violent crash landing and month-long exposure to Aleutian weather, the Zero could be restored to flying condition. The decision was made to ship the aircraft to Naval Air Station North Island in San Diego, where it would undergo complete restoration by the Navy's best aircraft mechanics. The work was conducted under tight security, with armed guards posted around the hangar 24 hours a day to prevent Japanese agents or souvenir hunters from interfering. The restoration team worked with impressive speed. By September 20th, 1942, less than 2 months after recovery, Koga Zero was ready for its first American test flight. The captured fighter had been repainted with American markings, the red Hinomaru circle replaced by the blue circle and white star of the United States Navy. To everyone who saw it, the transformation was surreal, Japan's most feared weapon now wearing the colors of its enemy. Lieutenant Commander Eddie Sanders, an experienced Navy test pilot, was selected for the honor and responsibility of flying the Zero. Sanders approached the cockpit with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He had heard countless stories about the Zero's capabilities, and now he would experience them firsthand. The cockpit was cramped even for Sanders, who was not a large man and everything was labeled in Japanese characters he could not read. But the basic controls were familiar enough. Stick, rudder pedals, throttle, trim wheels. Sanders fired up the Nakajima Sakai engine, and it roared to life with surprising smoothness considering its ordeal. He taxied the Zero to the runway, feeling the aircraft's responsiveness even at ground speeds. As he advanced the throttle for takeoff, Sanders experienced the Zero's legendary acceleration. The lightweight fighter practically leaped into the air, climbing at a rate that would have been impressive even for a modern jet. Once airborne, Sanders put the Zero through a comprehensive series of tests. He climbed to altitude, performed rolls and loops, tested stalls and recovery, pushed the aircraft to its limits. What he discovered over the next several weeks of intensive flight testing would fundamentally change American tactics and aircraft design in the Pacific War. Sanders confirmed that the Zero's strengths were genuine. Its turning radius was extraordinary, capable of completing a full circle in less time than any American fighter. Its rate of climb was phenomenal, allowing it to gain altitude advantage quickly in combat. Its range was unprecedented for a single-engine fighter, explaining how Zeros could appear hundreds of miles from their bases when American pilots thought they were beyond enemy fighter range. But Sanders also discovered the Zero's critical weaknesses, vulnerabilities, that Japanese propaganda had successfully concealed. At high speeds above 300 miles per hour, the Zero's ailerons became extremely heavy, making rolling maneuvers difficult. The aircraft had no hydraulic boost for its flight controls, meaning pilots had to use pure muscle power to move the control surfaces at high speeds. This was manageable at low speeds where the Zero excelled, but at high speeds it became a potentially fatal limitation. Even more significant, Sanders discovered that the Zero could not dive as fast as American fighters. The lightweight construction that gave the Zero its remarkable maneuverability also meant it lacked the structural strength and weight needed for high-speed dives. An F-4F Wildcat, and especially the newer F-6F Hellcat then entering service, could dive away from a Zero at speeds the Japanese fighter could not match without risking structural failure. Sanders also confirmed what many American pilots had suspected. The Zero had virtually no armor protection and no self-sealing fuel tanks. A few well-placed bullets could set a Zero ablaze or kill its pilot, whereas American fighters were increasingly equipped with armor plate behind the pilot's seat and fuel tanks that could seal themselves after being punctured. The Zero's designers had sacrificed protection for performance, a calculated trade-off that had worked brilliantly in 1940 but was becoming increasingly costly by 1942. The intelligence gathered from Sanders' test flights was immediately distributed throughout the American military. Fighter squadrons received detailed briefings on Zero capabilities and, more importantly, on how to exploit its weaknesses. The new tactics were straightforward. Never try to turn with a Zero at low speeds, never engage in a slow-speed dogfight where the Zero's maneuverability gave it an insurmountable advantage. Instead, American pilots were instructed to use energy tactics, maintain speed, use boom and zoom attacks diving from altitude, and if pursued by a Zero, dive away at full throttle. The heavier American fighters could not outturn a Zero, but they could outdive it, outroll it at high speeds, and survive hits that would destroy a Zero. These tactics, developed directly from test flights of Koga's captured Zero, were taught to every fighter pilot deploying to the Pacific theater. The impact on aircraft design was equally profound. While the F-6F Hellcat was already under development when the Zero was captured, testing of Koga's aircraft influenced final design decisions. Engineers at Grumman studied the Zero's wing design, which integrated the wings with the fuselage in a manner unusual for American aircraft of the period. Some of these concepts influenced the Hellcat's final configuration, though claims that the Hellcat was designed specifically to counter the Zero based on the captured aircraft are somewhat exaggerated given the Hellcat's development timeline. What is undeniable is that Koga's Zero provided American pilots and engineers with comprehensive knowledge of their primary adversary. Mock dogfights between the captured Zero and American fighters allowed pilots to practice the new tactics against the actual aircraft they would face in combat. The psychological impact was enormous. The Zero was no longer an invincible mystery, but a known quantity with exploitable weaknesses. By 1943, American pilots using the new tactics were achieving increasingly favorable kill ratios against Zeros. The F-6F Hellcat, incorporating lessons learned from the captured Zero, would go on to achieve a kill ratio of 19-1 against Japanese aircraft. The tide had turned. What had once been Japan's most fearsome weapon was increasingly becoming obsolete, outclassed by newer American designs and tactics, specifically developed to counter its strengths while exploiting its weaknesses. Koga's Zero continued flying test missions for the US Navy until February 1945, when it was accidentally damaged in a taxiing mishap at North Island. A Curtiss SB-2C Helldiver with poor forward visibility struck the Zero while it was being taxied, with the dive bomber's propeller cutting chunks out of the fighter's fuselage. The damage was too severe to justify repair, and after nearly 3 years of service to the country it was built to fight, Koga's Zero was retired. The story of the Akutan Zero demonstrates how a single stroke of fortune can alter the course of warfare. Had Koga's oil line not been hit, had he chosen to ditch at sea rather than attempt a landing, had the crash destroyed the aircraft or killed American recovery efforts, the Pacific War might have followed a different trajectory. Instead, one pilot's fatal mistake and a month of preservation in an Aleutian bog delivered to the United States the intelligence windfall that helped turn the tide in the Pacific. Tadayoshi Koga died at 19, never knowing that his aircraft would become one of the most important intelligence prizes of World War II. His Zero, built to establish Japanese air superiority, instead became the key to destroying it. The young pilot's emergency landing, intended to save his life and preserve his aircraft for Japan, accomplished neither goal but inadvertently saved countless American lives by revealing the secrets of the legendary Zero fighter.